This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. So the mantra in Illinois, both political parties, fiscal conservatism and social moderation, right? Everybody's a fiscal conservative and a social moderate. And as Voltaire said of the Holy Roman Empire, which was neither holy nor Roman, nor an empire, neither are they fiscal conservatives nor social moderates. You have one party that are blank check big government types and cultural Marxists. That's the Democrats. And the Republican Party just surrenders to the big government blank check types and blank check big government types and cultural Marxists. So we talk a lot about the financial metrics in Illinois, stability, business climate. But there's another kind of underappreciated consequence of never holding anybody accountable in either party. Not in a long time. Not in the high-profile positions. And we're seeing it play out right now. The sex abuse scandal in CPS, the sexual harassment culture in Springfield. Those are consequences of never holding anyone accountable. Those in power are left to feed their appetites however they see fit because they know there'll be no consequences regardless of how depraved they behave. So if you want to change the culture in Springfield that there's so much hand-wringing over, particularly in the Chicago press corps, then you need to change out some of the personnel. And so there was a press conference yesterday that's worth noting that was spearheaded by Jeanne Ives, not only to call for Madigan, renew the call for Madigan to step down as speaker in the wake of more allegations against more inner circle members of Madigan's power structure of a sexual nature. And, of course, you had his chief of staff resign, Tim Mapes resign last week. But also to elevate individuals that have the same attitude that Jeanne Ives and a handful of other legislators have, which is conservative reform. We've tried everything in this state over the last 100 years except conservative reform. I mean, everything being essentially rent-seeking, corporatist, combine, Democrat, Republican, Republican, Democrat, big government, government-centric rule. That's what we've been doing. Well, that hasn't worked. It hasn't worked whether Republicans have been in charge or Democrats have been in charge. So how about a paradigm shift? If you're serious about ending a culture of sexual harassment in Springfield, forget even the economics for a second, having some accountability for a sex abuse scandal in CPS, 230 cases where CPS's own legal department has found evidence of misconduct, of the city's legal department. And that's just the first Tribune expose. If you're serious about that, and you're serious about what you say, 85% of the state thinks we're on the wrong track. Half the state wants to leave. They cite taxes as the number one reason, but I think it's more of a whole cultural malaise. Then one thing you can do, now that the barbarism has been exposed, is hold some of the barbarians accountable when elections roll around. And that's the message that, in part, some legislators, incumbents, as well as some legislative candidates delivered yesterday. One of those is our friend, State Representative Tom Morrison, Republican from Palatine, who was at that press conference as well and joins us now. Tom, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Hey, good morning, Dan. Hi, Amy.
Good morning. So how have things shifted, the ground underneath Madigan's feet as more allegations against more members of his inner sanctum, as I mentioned, have accrued?
Well, I think for the first time, people finally see an end to this, to Madigan's, iron grip in Springfield. I hope it continues. I hope, one of the calls yesterday was for our Democratic colleagues to actually stand up and do something rather than just hold a press conference or, just signal, well, yeah, this is a problem, but really not do anything about it.
But do you think, Madigan's going to listen because he's so power hungry, he's so oblivious? I mean, the man doesn't even own a cell phone. So he's not living in our reality.
He lives a simple life.
Oh, yeah, right.
Very
so you can't even find him when people want to find him.
Right. So I've talked to some of his former state reps, those who are still around the Capitol complex doing lobbying work or whatever. And because I've asked them, my understanding of Madigan was he was very old school. There's the classic blue collar Democratic lawmaker where they were more socially conservative, pro life, what have you, but union friendly. And I asked this one fellow, what changed in Madigan? Why did he start to push for some of these very, as you said, Dan, very extremist positions on some of the social issues? And he said Madigan wanted to stay in power. He wanted to remain speaker. And so that's why he made that shift. And so I think you're starting to see that, but some of the members in his caucus now recognize him as being dead weight. And so I was at a conference last week, and I heard Tucker Carlson say, the left, they're willing to tolerate bad behavior, bad actors, as long as it achieves their ends. As soon as that individual or those individuals are dead weight, then they're gone. And who knows, we may be seeing that with Mike Madigan.
Right. It seems to me we're not at critical mass quite yet, maybe nowhere near critical mass quite yet, and especially in an election cycle where you've got a number of targets, Democrat incumbents who are facing competitive races there and who lean on Madigan's money. They rely on Madigan's money. Now is probably not the time to jettison him if they can otherwise avoid it, but perhaps next year in a new crop of legislators, that'll change. And that also requires, it seems to me, and I think this was part of the message yesterday, some change in personnel on the Republican side, too, because as we've seen, Republicans may not have the same systemic problem that it seems Madigan has, but they have not been nearly as aggressive on the sexual harassment issue as they should have been either. I mean, there are Republicans on that ethics commission that failed to do their job to make sure a legislative inspector general was appointed as well.
Well, remember, the way the House rules are written, that every 2 years, as the new crop of legislators gets sworn in, the first two votes we take are who will be the next Speaker of the House. So it's state reps who are voting for Speaker. Let's just make that very clear, because there are still some people who think that Madigan is a statewide, elected statewide somehow. No, Michael Madigan is a state representative elected Speaker by his members every 2 years. Second vote we take is for what will the House rules be. And the House rules are so onerous, they give nearly total power to the Speaker and those close to him. And so, I'm not gonna condemn some of my Republican colleagues. Maybe we should have done more, but the way the House rules are written, it's nearly impossible for the minority party to push any kind of agenda until we flip 9. We need to flip 9 seats. If the Democrats are not going to get rid of Madigan within their own caucus, then the voters have an opportunity to flip 9 seats and give us control.
Yeah, but it seems to me there's been some reticence among those with leadership titles in the Republican Party. As much as they like to jawbone and demagogue Madigan, they have not moved on Madigan. Thus the need for some conservative reform candidates. And now these are general election now running against incumbent Democrats, but conservative reform candidates of the ilk of you, of Jeanne Ives, of Alan Skillicorn, of Margot McDermott, of Mark Batnick, who are serious about paradigm shift in Springfield.
Well, there's no question we need that. And I have seen our caucus grow with like-minded people, who want to be advocates for the taxpayer, who want to be advocates for good government and transparent government, and who are not there as part of a fraternity culture. You've heard that term used. And I've seen that, not among everybody. I mean, there are some people down who go to the legislature who want to really make a serious difference. But there is that, kind of casual attitude, just let me accept the crumbs and I'll be happy and I'll have a title, and that needs to go away. And I think it is a gradual shift, but it is shifting.
But do you think in this day and age with the whole Me Too movement that you can convince fellow Democrats, or not fellow Democrats, but reach across the aisle and get the Democrats not to vote for Mike Madigan? Or would there be just such major consequences?
Dan just said it a minute ago. I mean, Michael Madigan he is the only person in the United States who holds both the position of, leadership of a legislative chamber, i.e. Speaker of the House, and also is chairman of the Democratic Party. So he controls the legislative process, and he also controls the flow of money in these campaigns. And that is why it is nearly impossible for those Democratic lawmakers to act independently or act in the best interest of their constituents. They're beholden to him, and the handful of individuals who have just inched away from loyalty to Madigan have been disciplined. You look at a Ken Duncan, you look at a Scott Drury, for example. And that's why you're not going to really see independence from them. We haven't hit critical mass there, so now it's up to the voters. You decide. And now that we're entering the summer campaign season, when a candidate comes to your door and asks for your vote, you must ask that person, who are you going to vote for Speaker of the House? And don't tolerate a weak answer like, I want to see who's running. Something like that.
I hate that. But doesn't Mike Madigan also set the tax code, but yet he works as an attorney to reduce property taxes to large companies in Chicago?
Well, that's just it. I mean, when you've been in power as long as Mike Madigan, when you control the lawmaking process, it's very easy to comply with state law that you wrote.
It's
right?
so sick.
So that's why I'm happy that more and more people know who Mike Madigan is, what he has done, his side business. The Madigan documentary, that's up on YouTube now. It's excellently researched, produced film. Share that. Share it on YouTube. Type in Madigan documentary on YouTube and share it with your friends.
And as we look prospectively to the November election, and you talked about flipping the net 9 seats that are needed to depose Mike Madigan, you're a Northwest suburban guy. It seems to me, looking around the Chicago metropolitan area, that those 9 seats that need to be flipped largely run through suburban Cook and the Collars.
Yeah, and we had some great candidates who are running. I mean, so Amy Kessam was one of the speakers yesterday. She's running against Robert Martwick. It's Chicago, but it's the very extreme northwest part of the city of Chicago.
Yeah, and she's a police officer, isn't she?
Yeah, lieutenant.
Yeah,
yes,
lieutenant. That's right. Yep. And then Marilyn Smolinski is running against Marty Moylan. We have Jillian Burness running against Michelle Mussman in the Schaumburg area. And so we do have some great candidates who are running. And again, the jig is up. Those Democratic state lawmakers who pass like a bill that supposedly helps lock in or contain property tax increases. Those are sham bills. They're introduced in the House. They're passed in the House with no possibility of them even being called in the Senate. So when you get those mailers saying, your Democratic state representative is fighting for reduced property taxes, it's a scam. It's a joke. And furthermore, a lot of them are also pushing for the graduated income tax, which would raise taxes on middle-income families. So don't buy it. Elect Republicans, but elect the right kind of Republicans who are there to absolutely transform the culture down there. For example, when your Republican state lawmaker comes to your door and asks for your vote, ask that Republican state lawmaker if they're going to opt into the lawmaker pension plan.
Mm-hmm.
There is no reason why Republican lawmakers should be opting into the pension plan. And we've started to lose a little bit of traction on that. We're over 60 now. Over 60 have opted out since 2010. But it should be every single member should be going down there, not opting in, because then that gives you the platform to talk to anybody about pension reform, from public school teachers to state workers to university staff, and say this is absolutely an anchor that's going to sink us if we don't fix this, and we need to lead by example as lawmakers, and then do it for the other 5 pension plans as well.
And that's good. That's a good point. Also, too, just in terms of yesterday's press conference with candidates plus legislators, this is the group of conservative reformers who's actually standing with whistleblowers like Denise Rothheimer and others who are making these allegations. So these are the people in office and aspiring to office who are willing to be public in support of a complainant's bill of rights when it comes to these harassment cases and doing something substantive about that fraternity culture, as it were, down in Springfield, which is frankly unfair to fraternities. That's how bad it is.
Yeah, well, I recall, so it used to be tradition that when a lawmaker introduces his or her first bill, there's a little bit of a hazing that goes on. Pretty innocuous, but over the years, it kept getting more and more and more ridiculous. And I remember, actually, this lawmaker's out of office. She was the Candy Crush lawmaker.
Oh yeah,
who was caught playing Candy Crush.
So
she was
right.
bored.
So when she was introducing her first bill, I guess she's a singer or something like that, so she has some talent there. And a lawmaker asked her to sing the national anthem. Oh. Okay, so this is during her hazing. This went on for half an hour. Oh. And I remember sitting on the House floor. All of the session proceedings are live streamed, right? And I was thinking, if I still owned my business, if I was watching this going on, I would just absolutely be livid. This is how my state lawmakers, those who are governing me, spending my tax dollars, this is how they're using their time?
Oh, that's embarrassing.
It's outrageous. And thankfully, so I spoke up. I went to my caucus leader at the time, it was Tom Cross, and then I went over to Madigan's side and I said, this has to end. And thankfully, it has largely ended. And so it's just trying to move. Look, I readily admit, the Springfield does not hinge on what State Representative Tom Morrison does. But if I could be a little bit of an influence on my colleagues and move that needle a little bit, and if I'm joined by others, we gradually start to change this state. Some of us we all know people who've moved out of state. And there's this sentiment that the grass is greener in other states. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. You may be trading one set of problems for another. But for those of us who are here, we have to fight for our state, and we can win this if we have the right people and the right policy. And character is king. Character matters. And so be very careful about who you choose for public office.
He is State Representative Tom Morrison, Republican from Palatine. Tom, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.